Two more women have now come out with allegations against Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore. Now, one of the women, Gena Richardson, says that she was in high school working in the men's department at Sears at the local mall when she had been approached by Roy Moore. So this was, of course, posted in the Washington Post. And these women explain their relationship and their interactions with Roy Moore. This, of course, happened back in the 70s, right? Now, she recalls that she had been approached by Moore just before or after her 18th birthday, she's not quite sure, as more than a 30-year-old local attorney was gaining a reputation for pursuing young women at the mall in Gadsden, Alabama. Now, his overtures had apparently caused one store manager to tell new hires to, quote, watch out for this guy, another young woman to complain to her supervisor, and Richardson to eventually hide from him when he came into Sears, the women say. So, now Richardson says Moore, now a candidate for U.S. Senate, asked her where she went to school and then for her phone number. Now, she had declined that and said, oh, you know, my dad, he'd never approve of that. So Daddy says, no, he's very, very strict, right? I can't give you my phone number. Now, obviously, she didn't want to give him his phone number in the first place. And it's one of those things where, can't do it. My dad would never approve. Even though, of course, she didn't want to be approached by Moore, and she didn't know how to do it, right? She didn't know how to get him to go away, because he wouldn't go away on his own, right? Nothing that she would say that would actually make him stop harassing her, okay? Now, to give you an example of how far this guy went, a few days later, she said she was in trigonometry class at Gadsden High. Again, she was a high school student, when she was summoned to the principal's office over the intercom in her classroom. And of course, when she got there, she realized she had a phone call. Now, she answered the phone, said, I said hello, and the male on the other line said, Gena, this is Roy Moore. I was like, what? He said, what are you doing? I'm in trig class. What do you expect? I'm in school. Why are you calling me at school? That's not what she said, but that would be my question. Like, I'm in school. What the hell are you doing? Why are you calling me? Well, apparently there was a reason that he called, and it was to ask her out on a date. A few days later, after he asked her out at Sears, again, after that call, because she had, again, said no, she finally relented and agreed, feeling both nervous and flattered. According to the report, they met that night at a movie theater at the mall. After she got off work, a date that ended with Moore driving her to her car in a dark parking lot behind Sears and giving her what she called an unwanted forceful kiss that left her scared. Quote, after that, I never wanted to see him again, says Richardson, who is now 58 and a community college teacher living in Birmingham. Richardson, whose account was corroborated by classmate and Sears coworker Kayla McLaughlin, is among 4 women who say Moore pursued them when they were teenagers or young women working at the mall. Richardson and Becky Gray, the woman who complained to her manager, have not previously spoken publicly. Now, there's another woman, Phyllis Smith. Now, Phyllis Smith was also working at a store in the mall. Now, this was Brooks, and it was a clothing store geared toward young women. Now, apparently, Roy Moore loved to go into that store, even though it was geared towards young women. When he was there, not for the clothes, he was there for the girls. And he was in there so much and bothered them so much that Smith had said the teenage girls would counsel each other to make yourself scarce when Roy shows up. He's just here to bother you. Don't pay attention to him, and he'll eventually go away. Jeez. Now, all in all, the Post spoke to about a dozen people who worked at the mall or were there as teenagers during the late 70s and early 80s and recall Moore as a frequent presence. A well-dressed man walking around alone, leaning on counters, spending enough time in the stores, especially on weekend nights, that some of the young women who worked there said that they had become very uncomfortable. Many of these people talk about his continued presence at that mall during that point of time. He said Becky Gray, who was 22 and working in the men's department of a store called Pizzitz, said, quote, It would always be on a Friday or Saturday night. Parents would drop kids off, let them roam the mall. Well, then he started coming up to me. She says Moore kept asking her out, and she, of course, would refuse. I'd always say, no, I'm dating someone. No, I'm in a relationship. And again, he wouldn't quit. Gray says that he was persistent in a way that made her uncomfortable. She says he lingered in her section or else by the bathroom area, and that she became so disturbed that she complained to the Bezit's manager, Maynard von Spiegelfield. Gray says he told her that it was not the first time he had a complaint about him hanging at the mall. Smith, a one-time Brooks employee, said that she was probably 19 when Moore began coming into the store, which she says employed many teenage girls. She remembers him being alone and had the strong impression he was not looking to shop. Smith, who lives in Gadsden, and who is a Democrat, not that that actually matters, said, quote, I can remember him walking in and the whole mood would change with us girls. It would be like we were on guard. I would find something else to do. I remember being creeped out. Smith said Moore never approached her personally, but she saw him chatting with other young clerks and that she would tell new hires to watch out for this guy. She says that occasionally one of the store managers would have to deal with bounced checks, which meant going to the DA's office where Moore worked. She said the managers would draw straws to decide who had to go talk to him about the cases. She said it was just, quote, sort of a dreadful experience. Well, sounds like it. And, of course, I can see why. Now back to Richardson, who again did go out a date with Moore. She explained in detail what that date was like. She said she met Moore at the movie theater. She said she can't remember what they saw, but only what happened after. She says it was cold and Moore offered to drive her to her car, which was more than a football field's distance away in a parking area behind Sears. She says he parked by her car and began chatting with her. And again, she says, hey, look, my dad, very, very strict. That's why I can't go out with you. I just explained to him that my dad's a minister, and I just can't sneak around because that's wrong. So I thanked him and started to get out, and he grabbed me in, pulled me in, and that's when he kissed me. It was a man kiss. A really deep tongue, like very forceful tongue. It was a surprise. I'd never been kissed like that. And the minute that happened, I got scared then. I really did. Something came over me that scared me. And so I said, I've got to go. My curfew is now. This guy's 30 years old, and he's dating girls with curfew who are still in high school. That's gross. She says that after that happened, she got out of the car and ran to her own. Now, Richardson and McLaughlin, who again corroborates this, said they talked about it afterwards, and when Moore came back into Sears, McLaughlin would warn her friends so she can hide in the back of the store. I would call and say he's coming this way. McLaughlin says she would go to the back. She was that uncomfortable. Richardson then says, all these years, I thought that it was just an isolated incident. And this is talking about why she came forward. Now as a mother and a grandmother, it just makes me physically sick. I realized that it didn't just happen to me. No, it was part of a pattern. He had done this to plenty of different teenage girls. This is the creepy guy that went into the mall and tried to hit on teen girls. Tried to get them to go out with him, would pressure them relentlessly, would go into their places of work, and try to get them to go out on dates. And then when he did get a date, which was very, very reluctant, he would end up putting moves on these girls, which were sexual assault. There was no consent. These were definitely unwanted. So, I mean, this is a clear case. None of these girls wanted that. But that's who Roy Moore is, man. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.